Why are you all looking at me? Stop. Okay, stop looking at me. It's making me nervous. I'm gonna pee on the stage here. And like, I'm on a stage. Why am I on a stage? Did I win something? Did I win something? Am I supposed to take off my clothes now or something? I don't remember any. The last thing I remember. Okay, wait a second. Okay. I was like, it was my 18th birthday, and I wanted a pony boy, and my daddy said maybe if I was really good, and then wait, no, wait, it's coming back to me. It was my wedding night, and Mr. Anders said that there was a special thing that you have to do on your wedding night where you pry open, you know that part of your head that closes up when you're a baby? They had to pry it open again, and that, I don't remember anything else except, and now I'm here. And why do I have this compulsion to pee on the stage? It's just, I don't know. I'm confused. But, you know, and how did you all get here? Did the same thing happen to all of you as well? We should complain to somebody. And what have you done with Mr. Anders? Is he around here somewhere? God, it's scary. Anyway, I'm hoping we can get some answers from Robin Coste Lewis, who is going to come up here and talk to all of us about the thing with their heads and stuff. She's going to explain that to us. Actually, she's an amazing poet. It's coming back to me now. She's a poet. She has a book that she's working on called Shake It, Don't Break It. And she has an amazing piece in the new Pocket Myths Odyssey book about Laertes' slave. And I saw her at Kvetch and she was amazing. And like, she actually, like, I found out later that she actually saves people's lives. Things are coming back to me now, but I still have the peeing, like, thing. I don't know, anyway. But she saves people's lives because, like, they started having her read poetry to them when they were under general anesthetic, and, like, they would come out of it, like, healthier, and like the outcomes were like 500% better, but they would also be like smarter, and they would grow like 5 or 6 extra lobes in their brain, and they would come out of it like just charged up and ready to go and like throw whatever organs they might have left at like oppression and injustice, and just go out there and kick ass. And like, you know, everybody, like Republican congressmen would suddenly, like, it would just be amazing. They would have this whole new conviction. And you know, she was like required in operating rooms for a while until the Republicans cracked down, but you can take that up with them. And like, you know, also, you know, she was the first person in the whole world to start telling the whole absolute truth using words instead of food, which is really good because now food is a lot yummier when you just use it for eating. And so she did that, and like, if you like food, you should really, really thank her and appreciate her. So please welcome the incredible, you know, rejuvenating, amazing Robin Coste Lewis.
I want to marry Charlie. The first time I came to the Makeout room was about 1.5 years, and I just came with some friends, and I just moved back to California, and I walked in here and thought, I want to buy this place. Can I move in? So thank you, Makeout Room, for having us. It's really wonderful to be here. Let's see, what can I say? I'm working on a collection of poetry. A lot of my poems deal with religion, theology, mythology, and other kinds of myths that we tell ourselves. And I guess that's it. I'm just very happy to be here. Thank you for coming. I think it says a lot about Charlie and Other magazine that on a Friday night, this room is crowded for literature. It's very beautiful. So thank you for coming. It's great. I love it. And thank you, Makeout Room folks, too. The first poem I'm going to read is absolutely confusing. Don't expect to understand it. I read it mostly as a way to give us all a nice hot bath before I read other things. So Wittgenstein has this wonderful saying that it's a miracle considering how organic and magical and independent languages can be that two people can understand each other at all. So you couples out there, take heed. This is called Read All Over, and it's a list. It's a nursery rhyme of riddles that basically is taken from images from my childhood. It's called Red All Over. What's black and white and red all over? You guys remember that? Mm-hmm. The newspaper. So this is called Red All Over. And it's convenient because, that's the other thing I wanted to say. Thank God when I got here, Charlie was talking about how great it was that people were angry, and someone was talking about exotic places to travel. I feel like I live in the most exotic country in the world right now. So it's wonderful to be angry, and it's wonderful to feel like I can say that. The last time I was here, this guy came up to me and he said, "What's the most exotic place you've ever been?" And I wanted to say this conversation. This is red all over. The politics of frogs, the musk of butterflies, elegies of cotton, the whiteness of flies, interruptions by snails, a lie's guarantee, the hope of succotash, a chorus of hominy, permission of the persimmon, observations by the spine, the pincushions, reassurance, the propaganda of a line, cackling from the Bible, orations by the dog, the mirror's steady rifle, the fig tree scarlet log, ands and their derision, lending libraries in the eyes, patois agnosticism, the tongue's chainmail of wise, lady calling from the ocean, invisible man on the moon, Lindy hopping dead upon the ceiling in the living room, girl asleep in the avocado, the minstrelsy of the floor, and those bickering birds of paradise picketing our fickle front door. Just me alone. I also wanted to read here because I realized I could have a martini and read at the same time, and that was really fabulous. My family's from New Orleans, and my research is actually in Sanskrit, and I find myself trying to playing with language a lot and trying to ask of English or demand of English that it perform more fluidly. And so this next poem is called The New Family Plot. In New Orleans, our graves are above ground, and you put like 20 people in a plot who are dead, and it's wonderful. And I thought that death is a lot like love, so I wrote this poem. This is The New Family Plot. To ease down onto you, through you somehow, to kill that part of you you've come to me to kill. The best part is when there are more dead than living. It's easier then to call your feet Catholic. The dead are segregated, sitting in the color section of a tree, fingering their rosaries, ancestors of fear and tenacity. Imphaunted, yea, would have to be dead not to be. Worried about the shine like it na come from rough want. To be sure you paid Monsieur Pimp enough. Too much lagniappe and we start to get guilty. Not enough and watch out for hinkty. Hell, Marie, we are full of grass way. The word verga in Italian has a really strange characteristic of meaning both rod or stick and virgin. Language, it's all there, folks, I swear to God, it's all there. All our neuroses just waiting to be found. So anyway, I was reading these testimonies of refugees from a Somali refugee camp, and I came across an incredible quote that I didn't know how to make sense of. So I wrote this poem based on this quote. I'm going to read the quote and then I'll read the poem. Here's the quote by Abshira Adil Muhammad from Kenya in 2000. Women don't want the men to go into the bush because the women will only be raped, but the men will be killed. I have seen a woman who was caught in the bush by several men. They tied her legs to 2 trees while she was standing. They raped her many times, and before leaving her, they put stones in her vagina. This is Verga. Before leaving her, they put stones in her vagina. The men will only be raped, but the stones will be killed. The bush caught many men to go into the stones. The stones will be killed by several trees before leaving. The bush tied the men to the trees in their vaginas. Before bush go to trees, they kill many stones. Many trees will be caught by the stones in the bush. Several trees will be raped by the bush and then killed. Only the caught men will be stoned and killed by the trees. Several men were caught by the trees before leaving. The men will be killed, but the women will only be treed. The stones put many trees into the men's killed vaginas. 2 trees were raped several times by the bush. Before leaving, the vaginas were seen standing in the stones. And Too Easily Fallen. Just really quickly, for those of you guys who don't remember the whole Orpheus myth, Eurydice gets killed because she's being chased by this horrible god who's trying to rape her, and anyway she goes to Hades. And then Orpheus, because he's so forlorn, supposedly, I don't buy it, goes down to Hades and convinces the gods that he loves her so much and misses her so much that he wants her back. And they say, yes, only you can have her as long as when you walk up from Hades, you don't look back at her. You guys remember that? Everybody know? So as long as he doesn't look back at Eurydice, then he gets to have his beloved. But I think that Orpheus is full of shit. And I think that he's using Eurydice in her absence as a way to get attention for himself. You know those kind of people? We do. We all do. I'm so brokenhearted. Love me, love me, love me, right? So anyway, I started wondering, what the fuck does Eurydice feel? So this is Lightly Clinging and Too Easily Fallen. I think that's my phone, no teasing. Okay, this is Lightly Clinging and Too Easily Fallen. The title's taken from a line from Ovid when he was talking about the myth of Eurydice and Orpheus. Turn around, Orfeo. I want you to. I do not want to crawl back up into that hole with you. I've seen trees drag themselves across a lawn. Sirens leaned back in their bar stools, tossing room keys and lighting blunts and throwing panties on stage. I've eaten roses. Even worms dream of suicide. But just now, the mountain is in her courses. The sea is coming and giggling all night. There are more animals below the earth than above it. When they move, it snows mud. We climb into the alcove, sipping each abandoned sensation that seeps down hot and breached to us. Masochist centuries, Occidental fetish always to be or lease a milky girl, mouth gaping and permanently aghast. Why don't you put on your body today? Did you think the beauty would attack you? It isn't possible to die from too much happiness. Turn around, Orfeo, look at me. I am not sad, I'm thirsty. And it's based on a painting. Several poems in my collection are based on paintings from around the world. This is based on a painting by William Henry Johnson called Three Little Children. For time's sake, I won't even go into it, but you should look at it. William Henry Johnson was this African-American painter who went into exile in the 30s and then to escape Hitler because he was married to a white woman and a Danish woman came back to the States, haha, as if that were any better, but he did in the 30s, go figure. And she died and he got really depressed and he started making these paintings. And one is of these three little children and they're sitting on a bench. And it's a beautiful painting, but it's eerie. It's just a freaky painting. And it wasn't until I realized that his wife had died right before he did this painting and he went down south to hide from all of his feelings, I guess, that I started thinking about this painting differently. So this is called Three Little Children. And I started also thinking about how much life is like being inside of a painting, right? And the whole metaphor, many writers have talked about it, the whole metaphor of being, creation's model, sitting for creation, being of it. So also I wanted to say this is for Tessa and Susan. They're off in the back. They're two dear friends of mine, and often I feel like those three little children when I'm with them. They are incredibly lovely people, and we talk a lot about life and what it feels like to be the creator's models. So this is for them. This is called Here, William Henry Johnson's Three Little Children, oil on paper, 1944. He just places us here. I should say I really have a problem with God. He pisses me off. So you'll get that. So it's also a form of devotion. Anger is. He just places us here, tells us not to move. We sit static, our whole lives contained within his emblematic frame. The air, on average, undulating beige. I feel, oh great, you guys can't hear me all this time, really? Okay, I'll start over. He just places us here, tells us not to move. We sit static, our whole lives contained within his emblematic frame. The air, on average, undulating beige. I feel below for the midnight ground. He alone transports me to this red limit, this empty verge where I dangle amorphous, midpoint to configuration. Still, there is more to this than merely sitting, more to him than his vaporous stare. I remember walking, talking, the leaves, how a snail moves. My body misses itself. Even my skin mats like drying clay. Though he arranges us too closely, it's him I'm looking at, him we all see. All lured by form and its formal improbability. What isn't going on here? Almost nothing, everything. Staunchly prime with us, his palate's quiet. We sit and try to endure his reasons for painting our eyes both so dark, so bright. The most we can do is remain here and stare back and reflect his concealed but runny mercury. Thank you.
Robin Coste Lewis, everybody. So I installed one of those filters, like to keep me from saying anything like too obnoxious or offensive up here. It's actually it's like one of those HEPA filters, except it's blog shaped. And because I'm basically just like a random word generator up here. I just kind of whatever words pop in come out, and like so the filter it works really well, except for whenever there's a word that starts with a vowel. In which case so actually I'm really excited because one of the things I've been working on lately, I've been co-opted now for about 5 years, but once you're co-opted, you have to trade up. Like, it's hard to trade up because, like, I was kind of co-opted by some pretty low-rent people, and but now the new people who co-opted me, they had to the meetings lasted like fucking 9 months between the old people who co-opted me and the new people who co-opted me. They had to parcel me up. So now I'm 57% co-opted by the old people and 38% co-opted by the new people, which means actually there's still 5% left, okay? Anybody wants to co-opt the last 5% of me, just come and talk to me, because it's all going, I swear to God. So next up, we have the amazing Eileen Gunn, who's here from Seattle. Where are you? Okay. She's an incredible, amazing science fiction writer who she's done a lot for short fiction. Actually, she's been putting up. She's done the webzine The Infinite Matrix for how long now? Too many years, and she has a short story collection called Stable Strategies and Others, which includes a Hugo-nominated story, Stable Strategies for Middle Management. Yes? Nebula winner. Sorry, I am dumb. And she actually she's, like I said, she's done a lot for short fiction. She was the first person to have like a short story with like subroutines in it. In fact, she had one story that was like 5 words long, but it took you like 8 hours to read because you'd be like, following all the pointers and like all the little, all the processes going in the background. And, she managed to have one character who was like 9-dimensional because of all the different processes going on in the higher math. She used higher math to basically make this character like the opposite of themselves in like every way, and also like orthogonal to themselves. And the only problem was that one story that was Hugo nominated actually contained an infinite recursion, which she didn't realize when she published it, which is why actually that there were no Hugo winners from 2002 to 2004, because people were trapped in like basically an infinite regressive spiral of metafiction. And it's true. And she also had the first artificially intelligent protagonist who gave the story that they were in a really bad review, unfortunately, which is kind of embarrassing when that happens, but they've patched it up. So please welcome the fantastic Eileen Gunn.
Well, I heard this. We're going to be great introductions. So stoked. All right. How could I be shorter than anybody else? Wow, I haven't been shorter than anybody else since 5th grade. Right. I've got 2 very short pieces to read, one of which is an homage to Charlie and Anna Lee, but we'll leave that for later. Okay, the first one is actually, it's a Kirk Spock / story. I wrote it for Victoria Garcia, who's a Seattle writer who, for her 40th birthday, wanted an anthology of forbidden stories. Forbidden Kirk Spock stories. Now, there's only one category of Kirk Spock stories that's forbidden, and that's giving birth stories. This is called No Place to Raise Kids, a story of forbidden love. This is no place to raise kids, Jim thought, looking around at smooth canvas rocks and pathetic plastic trees. But for people like us, in love and on the run, with babies on the way, there's no good place and no good time. They'd managed to conceal their affair from prying eyes, even on the mercilessly public stage that was the Enterprise. If, as he expected, Uhura knew she had kept their secret. But with the twins' gestation so near, there was nothing to do but jump ship, taking with them only the few props they could grab from the science officer's kip, and at the last minute, McCoy's black bag. Jim knew there was nothing in it but modernist pepper mills and hand-carved pieces of styrofoam packing material that it would have to do in a pinch. Those weird bits of styrofoam had saved his own life in the past. He looked over at Spock, who was sitting propped up against one of the fake rocks, breathing in short pants. In short pants? He thought, who writes this crap? They should read their damn scripts out loud. Push, he said. Shouldn't you push? Or should you not push? What did he know of these things? Where was computer? Computer was on the ship. Computer would know. We should have used a glass tank, he thought. But Spock had wanted the human experience of giving birth, and of course, he'd had the knowledge and skill to make the necessary modifications. And now, Spock was bringing forth his children in sorrow. The curse of Eve, 100% human. He's so stoic, Jim thought. So stoic, so brilliant, and so beautiful, really. Will he continue continue to be this lovely to me when the makeup wears off, the rubber ears crumble? Or will we sink into boring domesticity, raising tribbles, perhaps, for Harry Mudd? Centuries from now, a minute or two at warp speeds, the Enterprise will discover us gone. Will they return to this godforsaken location to look for us and find us dead, our starving descendants welcoming them as saviors? Or will they find a prosperous community, happily into syndication, repeating season after season? Thanks to relativity and the power of television, the crew of the Enterprise will remain young while we breed, age, and die. He could call Scotty with the flick of a switch, and Scotty would beam them up. Jim considered the idea. A few special effects, and he and Spock, in the throes of childbirth, would rematerialize on the deck of the Enterprise. Then the show would cut for a commercial, and the kids would generate plot complications happily ever after. That's not real life, Jim thought. That's not what it's all about. He could hear Spock thrashing against the canvas rock. He was yelling, "Grab the baby! Turn its head!" This was real life. Could never be published. I'm so glad I read it to you. Now, my next story, the last, is called Speak Geek, and it's an homage to Charlie and Annalee. Oh, it's also a story that I wrote before they wrote their book. But, you know, I was so hurt. They never asked me to contribute to their book. I'm a geek. I'm a real geek. So I wrote the story in revenge. And it's been published in Nature magazine. Nature, this is proof that it's a geek story. It was published, Nature only publishes scientific stuff except for the back page, where they're a little lax. So, people call me a nerd, but I say I'm a geek. In my youth, I ran wild on the farm and bit the heads off chickens. This was before the big tweak, back when chicken was dinner and man was dog. Dog was man's best friend. They call me a mutt, too. Sure, I'm a mutt. Mutt is good. Mutt is recombinant DOG. And I'm a smart mutt. I was smart before they tweaked me, and I'm a hell of a lot smarter now. I've watched untweaked bitches, pardon the expression, trot by on leashes, and I don't envy them. I don't even want to breed with them. And yes, I'm quite intact, not that you were asking. Their days are filled with grooming and fetching and the mutual adoration that comes with being someone's trophy pet. I have a second life, a life of the mind, beside which there's pails. Not that I take credit for my enhancements. I didn't get a choice. But gene engineering is inherently fascinating. Massively multiplayer, fraught with end-of-life as we know it threats. It made me who I am, and I've chosen it for my career. Working at Microsoft is the job of a lifetime. Loyalty is a big thing here, and you'd better believe I deliver. I love this place so much that I don't want to go home at night. There's free kibble and a never-empty water dish right outside my kennel. Did I tell you we each get our own kennel? Except for the contractors. I understand my place in the corporate structure and my importance to the man update. There's always more code in the genome, always something to snip or interpolate. That's why I was there in the middle of the night, a last round of corrections before the code freeze on Man 2.1. As you know, they never released 2.0. I was taking a good long slurp of water when I noticed the cats. They weren't making a big deal of it, just quietly going about their business. But there were cats in all the cubicles, in the exec offices, in the conference rooms.
It looked like they were running a whole separate company in the middle of the night. Who hired them? HR doesn't hire cats for R&D. They're not task-oriented. or good at working within a hierarchy. They sleep all day, better suited to industrial espionage, really. Back on the farm, I was a watchdog, and I've still got a bit of that energy. Better keep an eye out, I think. So I'm lying there in the doorway to my office, nose on my paws like I'm taking a break, when the alpha cat comes by. Big muscular Siamese mix. His flea collar says Dominic in red letters. Hey, Dominic, I call. I feel like a character in The Sopranos. You ever see that show? Great, no dogs to speak of, but great food show. The cat stops, stares. You talking to me? What's the story here, Dominic? No business of yours. He narrows his weird cat eyes and yawns ostentatiously. He turns away, shows me his butt, and walks slowly off, his loose belly fur swaying. I notice that his ears are facing backwards in case I rush him. He's not as nonchalant as he looks. Detective work is needed. I go down to the cafeteria, keeping my eyes open en route. Funny thing, I noticed there are cats in and out of Susan Gossman's office like she had a catnip rug. Gossman? Seen her in the hallways. We'd never spoken. She's more of a cat person. I slip a few bucks in a vending machine for one of those big leather bones. I chew. When I get back to my office, a savvy-looking brunette in a well-cut suit is sitting on a corner of the desk. Gossman. You're wondering about the cats, she says. I wave my tail a bit. Not a wag, but it says I'm paying attention. Her hair has copper highlights. Or maybe she put drugs in my water dish. Project Felix, she says, is an undocumented feature of the new Man release. Undocumented is right, I say. You're doing some kind of super tweaking with the human cat chimeras, and I don't think it's for Man 2.1. Chimeric DNA ripping through the wild? Influenza vector? You're a smart pup, she says. My hackles raise. Do Bill and Steve know what you're doing? Down, boy, says Gossman. Instinctively, I sit back on my haunches. Bill and Steve will find out soon enough. This is all for the better. Infected humans, and dogs too, will be smart and independent. The rest will just keep right on dipping seafood feast into plastic bowls. Woof, that's straightforward. She looks at me speculatively. Right now, we need a top-flight coder. I'm alert. My nose is quivering. But Gossman is relaxed. Everybody knows dogs are the best coders. But as a dog, you have some loyalty issues, am I right? I just stare at her. Loyalty is a gift, freely given, says Gossman. I give a half-hearted wag of my tail. Not for dogs, I think. But not for dogs, says Gossman. Wouldn't you like the freedom to make your own decisions? A whiff of feline flu could make all the difference. She pulls a tiny aerosol can out of her purse. I've got reflexes humans can't compete with. I could have it out of her hand in a split second. But do I owe my loyalty to the company? Or to the great web of which all dogs, cats, and humans are a part? She sprays. I breathe deep. She's right. Dogs are the best coders.
Eileen, Gunn, everybody. So if you didn't already put your email address down on our sign-up sheet, it's floating around somewhere, and please put your email address down. Only spam you once a month. yada yada, put an asterisk next to your email if you want to have sex with me, yada, usual. Anyway, so this is actually, but actually the truth is this is the last ever Writers with Drinks because we're merging with the Porchlight series and Litquake and Mortified and the Progressive Reading series. We're going to be one thing because it's just more efficient in this globalized, like, consolidated marketplace. We're going to be called Progressively Quaking with Mortification on the Porch with Drinks. And it's awesome. And people are going to be telling their true high school stories about Republicans. And it's going to rock. That's going to be next month. And I'm actually going to have I'm gonna have Stephen Elliott's head grafted here and Beth Lissack's head there. So I will be topless and talkative next month. So look for it. Our last reader tonight is a Writers with Drinks veteran, a survivor from the East Coast, the amazing Pagan Kennedy, who she actually did it twice, I think, on the East Coast. And she's, you know, actually for like the special night of like angry fighting bastard writers that we're doing tonight, she's really good because her catchphrase back in those like heady zinester days was, "Gonna bite you where you're gonna feel it next month." That was like her whole catchphrase. She would go around saying that to people, and you know, in fact, many people are still feeling it years later. And you know, she and Lisa Carver used to like mirror matching outfits made out of the hair from people that they'd ripped off, and you know, and they would have little, you know, human hair knitting circles. And it was all very nice, and you know, but you know, now she's sort of gone more mainstream, but she's still kind of keeping that edge. Like her book, Confessions of the Memory Eater, actually has little teeth, so if you like open it the wrong way, it bites you. The book. And which is why it had to be published by Marge Piercy, because Marge Piercy is actually a vampire, which you knew, right? And her new book, the first Man-Made Man, is actually about her new boyfriend Norbert, who's made out of pieces of all the men that she's like cut up over the years. And every time a piece falls off him, she just like glues on some more. And you know, it's an organic construct. He changes over time, but he's always Norbert. And she also invented the first Braille map of the ocean floor, which is why so many blind people are oceanographers now. So we owe her a huge, enormous debt. Please welcome the incredible Pagan Kennedy.
This on the ultra short person setting. All right, I think I got it. Oh, I'm still not. It's still not short enough. Okay. You still can't. Can you hear me now? Wow, you really are in the back. Wait a minute. So I fear you're going to be terribly, terribly disappointed in me after that introduction. And after the email Charlie sent out in which she said that I would arrive with my head off and just a bloody stump, and I wasn't able to do that for you. But I did come 3,000 miles just to see you guys. And to read to you from my new book, which actually doesn't look like this, which is called The First Man-Made Man, but is not exactly as Charlie described it. But I am your token non-fictionist for tonight, and I brought visual aids. So Charlie is going to be my lovely assistant, my Carol Merrill, if you will. So, thank you. So I'm beginning, and this is a biography of Michael Dillon, and so I just want you to start with a visual impression of him in 1950.
Get the top corner. There you go.
That's him walking with his aunt probably in 1950. And you don't have to hold it up too long or your arms will get tired, but there'll be more pictures. Michael Dillon, a bearded medical student, fiddled with his pipe and then lit it nervously. The year was 1950, the city, London, the restaurant, discreet. Dillon shared his table with a person so odd-looking that the other diners in the restaurant ogled and whispered to one another. He, or was it a she, wore a blazer and trousers, cropped hair and tie, but seemed to be hiding breasts under the suit jacket. Sorry, I'm having trouble seeing. Okay. In fact, Roberta Cow had been born male, but she could not live as a man anymore. She had begun dosing herself on massive amounts of estrogen, enough to melt away her muscles and put a blush in her cheeks. With no idea how to push her transformation further, Cal was stuck in the no man's land between the sexes, a terrible place to find yourself in 1950. The word transsexual had yet to enter common usage. Almost no medical literature acknowledged that thousands of people felt trapped in the wrong body and would do anything, including risk death, to change their sex. Michael Dillon, the medical student, had authored what was then one of the few books in the world to delve into the subject. In an eccentric little volume called Self, he argued on behalf of people like Roberta Cowell. Dillon proposed an idea that seemed wildly radical at the time. Why not give patients the bodies that they wanted? Thanks to recent technological breakthroughs, doctors could transform a man into a woman and vice versa. But because of the stigma against these sex changes, as well as laws that prohibited castration, only a few people in the world had crossed the line. Roberta Cowell had discovered Michael Dillon's book and decided she had to meet the open-minded scholar. She'd written to him care of its publisher, and they'd exchanged a flurry of letters. Now, finally, they sat across from one another. Dillon turned out to be handsome, Cowell reported in her autobiography. He was a good deal younger than I had expected and wore a full beard. Not bad looking. He was a very masculine type. Maybe too masculine. Despite his progressive attitude about sex change treatments, Dillon appeared to have a very low opinion of women, according to Cowell. It was an attitude she couldn't abide. After they'd eaten, she lingered at the table to debate the issue of women's intelligence. They ordered coffee. Dillon gestured with his pipe as he lectured her about the differences between the male and female brain. He clearly liked to throw his opinion around, especially with a lady present. Cowell played along. After all, if she was ever to emerge from the limbo of her body, she would need his help. Dillon seemed to relish his role as her protector, fingering his droll little beard, dropping Latin words and medical terms. He assured her that sex changes did exist. It was now possible for surgeons to entirely reshape the human body, he claimed. In fact, he possessed startling proof of exactly what medical science could do. Then Michael Dillon fell silent. He puffed smoke and fidgeted with his coffee cup, but did not drink. He glanced up at Roberta, then finally spoke. I don't really see why I shouldn't tell you. 5 years ago, I was a woman. More than a decade earlier, an athletic blonde named Laura Dillon roared through the streets of Bristol on her motorbike. She wore her hair short and a sports jacket hid her breasts. A skirt, her only concession to femininity, flapped around her ankles. With her broad shoulders, patrician accent, and Eton haircut, she could easily pass for a pampered young man. In fact, Laura had grown up thinking of herself as above the common lot. Her brother, the 8th Baronet of Lesbian, presided over a threadbare estate in Ireland, and her family still retained a residue of an ancient fortune. At first glance, Laura seemed to be a fellow just out of Oxford, dismounting his motorbike with a dashing leap. But blink again, and Laura was a cross-dressed girl. People who passed her on the street couldn't help staring, confused by the double image she presented. The children and old ladies were the cruelest, shouting insults or demanding Laura explain herself. When they came toward her, Laura froze her face into a mask. She refused to let them see how they got to her. Still, she preferred their taunts to the alternative, female clothing. Evening gowns terrified her. They invited young men to slide their arms around her waist. Ordinary dresses filled her with the sickening sense she had been obliterated. She knew herself to be a man who was disappearing inside a ridiculous body underneath breasts and hips. She didn't think she could go on anymore. Pills saved her. Laura Dillon had managed to get a hold of testosterone pills in 1938, soon after she graduated from college. She became the first woman on record to take the drug with the intention of changing her sex. Over several years, the hormone therapy transformed her into a muscular, deep-voiced man with fuzz on his cheeks. As soon as Dylan could look entirely male, he became invisible. Pumping petrol at a garage where he worked, greasy in his coveralls, Dylan easily passed as just another working man. More than passed. He became bland-looking, unremarkable, ordinary, which was what he'd always wanted. By the early 1940s, Dylan had mustered the courage to leave the garage for medical school under his male name. But hormones could only take Dylan so far. If other men caught a glimpse of him in the locker room or public baths, they would immediately know he had been born female. So in the early 1940s, Dylan sought out Sir Harold Gillies, Britain's top plastic surgeon. Gillies had reconstructed the genitals of soldiers who'd been bombed or burned, but he had never before built a penis from scratch on a woman's body. It would be grueling, and Gillies could not guarantee the results. At least the operation would be legal, while an arcane law protected male genitals from mutilation, quote unquote. No such ban applied to female genitals and reproductive organs. Dylan would eventually undergo a series of 13 operations to construct a penis. He began the treatments in 1946 while he was a student at Trinity College Medical School in Dublin, and he finished his surgeries in 1949, a year before he met Roberta Cowell. Gillies had to harvest skin for the new organ from Dylan's legs and stomach. And why did Dylan want the penis so badly? Not necessarily for sex. Rather, a penis would serve as a membership card into the world of men, their bathrooms, and their gentlemen's clubs in London. The lack of a penis had held him back, for without some kind of external organ, he could hardly undress for the shower and the rest of the crew, around the rest of the crew, as the surgeon Gillies noted. Furthermore, if Dylan fell ill, a penis would allow him to check into a hospital without having to explain why his genitals did not match the rest of his body. A penis, along with the beard and pipe, would hide his history, keep his secret that much safer. Dylan feared, above all, the tabloids. If rumor got out that Michael Dylan, brother to a baronet, had once been a girl, the gossip would surely be trumpeted in every low-class newspaper in Britain. As Dylan saw it, a penis would help to safeguard his privacy and his family's honor. So during the mid-1940s, Dylan lived a curious double life. He was both a medical student in Dublin and a patient in England. During the university term, he shadowed doctors on their hospital rounds, assisted in the surgical theater, and even performed an appendectomy. When the term ended, Dylan would ride a train through the English countryside to a small town called Basingstoke, home to Gluckstern House, the hospital overseen by Sir Harold Gillies. Here, men in military uniforms, their heads swaddled in bandages, lolled on park benches, putting cigarettes to the holes where their mouths should have been. Burn victims, a platoon of shot-up soldiers, children with cleft palates, and survivors of factory accidents. Dylan joined this small society of the mutilated and the maimed, and I have a picture of all that. Oh, whoops, I forgot to show this. Forgot to use Laura Dylan. This is Laura Dylan at age 16. Can you guys see? She grew up in a small seaside town, so thus the bathing suit, I guess. I don't really know the whole context or story behind that picture. And then the next picture, which goes sideways. There's Sir Harold Gillies reviewing his patients. And you can see the soldiers one of them is holding a baby, probably with a cleft palate. In the town surrounding the hospital, local people had grown used to seeing the patients without noses or jaws walking around. At the post office or on the street, Dylan and his friends could expect smiles and hellos from the villagers. But the patients knew that once they boarded the train, they would become pariahs at the very next town. Passengers would flinch, stare, scuttle away from them. Dylan had one advantage over most of the other patients in that world beyond Basingstoke. He could pass as an ordinary man as long as he kept his clothes on. Still, this passing came at an emotional cost. A rigidly moral man, he had to lie constantly. When he returned to Dublin and ran into his fellow medical students, he had to invent stories to explain why he limped and sometimes had to walk with a cane. He blamed his troubles on the war, insinuating he'd been maimed in the Blitz, which he had not. To keep the other students from asking questions, he cultivated a reputation as a stodgy bachelor, an older student who sequestered himself in the little house he owned. Now and then he asked a young woman out to dances and swooped around the floor in his white tie and tails, but Dylan did not go on second dates. One must not lead a girl on if one could not give her children. This was the basis of my ethics, he wrote later. Ethics weren't the half of it. How many women would be willing to risk the scandal of marrying the first artificial male? He didn't care to find out. To marry a young woman, he would have to confess too much to her. The 13 operations, the testosterone pills, the years of living as Laura. He was terrified, too, of what would happen if he ever did work up the nerve to tell a girlfriend about himself. He imagined how the smile would freeze on her face, and her eyes would dart away, and how, when she looked back at him, she would no longer see him as a man. He couldn't bear that, and so he avoided women. He brooded over the unfairness of his fate. It seemed that he'd been given manhood only to be denied a wife and children. Still, he loved the way he looked in the tie and tails. He enjoyed a night of dancing, and an evening of playful flirting eased his loneliness. So he took out a nurse or a female student now and then, but he never led her closer than the arm's length of a waltz. He kept his distance by treating women in a rough, brotherly fashion, those are his words, developing a reputation as a bit of a woman hater. He liked to lecture his dates about how the female brain was more suited to housework than intellectual pursuits, a strategy guaranteed to stifle romance. Especially in this crowd, right? Dylan claims that his misogyny was all an act, one of the tools he used to keep women from falling in love with him. But in fact, he did believe the female mind to be a strange and rather frightening organ. Women had hurt him over and over again, even before the sex change. In Lord Dylan's teenage and university years, she had fallen in love with at least 2 straight women. Both of them had pushed Laura away. The worst part was that these would-be sweethearts had regarded her as a lesbian rather than as the man she wanted to be. Dylan had enjoyed only a few close friendships, and these had almost always been with men, backslapping boys who accepted Dylan as a brother. So women could not be trusted. Dylan had learned this early on. By age 35, he had vowed never to fall in love. And then Roberta Cow slid into the seat across from him at that London restaurant, and he dared to hope again. Her wrists, slim and delicate from the estrogen treatments, peeped out of her cuffs. Her cheeks flamed pink, so soft below the short man's haircut. In the blur of Roberta Cowell's face, he could see the lovely ingenue she would become. Somewhere in there lived the one woman who could understand him, the one woman who could recognize him as a real man. He had decided from the logic of his profound isolation that Cowell must be his soulmate. Dylan was lonely in the way we can all recognize, and he also suffered from a brand new 20th century solitude too, one that had never existed before, the loneliness of the medical miracle, of the person who has experienced unique states of mind and body. He dared to confide in so few friends, and even the kindest of them had never understood. But now he shared a table with the first person he'd ever met, who'd entered that blur of hormones, who'd planned to transform her body just as he had. She relied on him, he liked to believe, not just as a doctor, but also as a man with a superior mind, who could guide her through difficulties. Dylan, too, had endured the torment of the in-between, when the hormones began pushing his body toward androgyny. He knew what it was like to stumble through a city street where passerbys stared at him. She was 3 years younger than he was, but seemed younger than that. She implored him for help. She needed him utterly. Dylan had waited his whole life for a woman to fasten her eyes on him the way she did, to ask for his protection. And so he trusted Roberta immediately. By the end of lunch, he poured out his story to her, surprising even himself with his openness. Then they parted. He returned to Dublin, where he was finishing up the last year of medical school, but Roberta continued to haunt him, to tug at his heart. He mailed her letters brimming with advice and confessions. The chief feeling you arouse in me, Bobby, is a desire to protect you and to treat you gently and to steer you along, he wrote. Whenever Dylan traveled to London, he made sure to call on her. At one of these early meetings, he whipped out his penis, which he was very proud of, wrote Cal. It wasn't any kind of seduction scene. He just wanted me to see what medical science had achieved. I had never seen anything like it. It was huge and in a constant state of semi-erection. She made a joke about the thing being rough-hewn. He didn't laugh. Dylan did not exactly have the most perfectly developed sense of humor, according to Cal. Though really, how could he have laughed? He'd unzipped for her. He'd showed her the evidence of his excruciating pain, all those operations. He'd wanted her to see how he'd turned that suffering into a handsome piece of flesh, and all she could do was snigger. Still, he refused to be discouraged. In his terrible loneliness, Roberta Cal began to haunt his thoughts. For the first time in his life, Dylan allowed himself to believe that one person might be able to understand him. He sent her long confessional letters about his girlhood and years at Oxford. He wanted her to know everything. She wrote back to him when she could find the time. They talked on the phone when she was in. It was 1951 now. Cal had turned herself into a va-va-va-voom peroxide blonde. She'd begun venturing out onto the streets of London in a wig, skirt, makeup. She had yet to go through the vaginal construction surgery and the facelift, but already she scorched the eyes of sailors as she flitted past them on the street. And yes, Charlie has a picture up. This is actually a picture of her in 1954. She became, when she was outed by the tabloids 3 years later, and that's actually a tabloid photo. She was the Christine Jorgensen of Britain. So she was quite famous back then. Okay, thank you. Dylan was a virgin. He locked himself in his flat, stared at her photograph, and trembled with passion. And for the first time, he submitted to the feeling entirely. I need to have 2 whiskeys in me before I could start off my beloved Bobby, he wrote her. I have never called anyone that before, and you know what my inhibitions are like. In an effusion of letters written on scraps of paper in between his rounds at the hospital, where he worked as a student doctor, he poured out his feelings. She replied with brief notes signed with nothing more than a scrawny B. Dylan chalked that up to her female modesty. Sometimes he sent her 2 letters a day. Oh, Bobby, come to me soon. I am wanting you all the time, he wrote to her. And you probably have had experiences in the zones of eroticism, and I have had none. Still, you could teach me. He wrote and wrote and wrote. Of course, she had reason to be demure. She was gathering the legal documents she would need to change from male to female. She was learning how to sway across the room and dangle her fork in a ladylike fashion. She would need time to adjust. He understood that. His most pressing worry was his medical exams, which he thought he might fail. He felt he should have a job as a doctor, or the promise of one, before he asked Bobby to marry him. He wrapped up a ring and nestled it inside an empty Player's cigarette package and sent it off to her, instructing her to tuck this gift away in a drawer. She was not to open it, not even to peek, until he'd passed his exams. It was now the summer of 1951. Robert Cal had become Roberta Cal in the eyes of the British government. She had become a legal woman. Dylan was a legal man. They could marry if they chose to. Dylan was cramming for his medical school finals. He thought he would probably fail the first time he took them. After all, he'd missed a lot of school for his trips to Rookstown. He wore his lucky Oxford tie on the day of the final examination. The tie did its work. Dylan passed. He had become, to his own astonishment, a licensed doctor. He fired off a letter to Bobby. "You can open the package now," he told her. Surely she would take him seriously when she saw the diamond winking up at her from the palm of her hand. Didn't every woman want a diamond? He was a doctor now. Didn't every woman want that too? He desperately needed a yes from her. He had mailed the letter, and now he began the long, awful vigil waiting for her reply. Dylan believed that if he and Bobby threw their lot in together, they would live as other people from good families did: a housekeeper, a little garden, some handsome furniture. Roberta Cow would make an excellent match. Like Dylan, she came from the upper classes. Her father, Sir Ernest Cow, had been the honorary surgeon to King George VI. If Dylan married and raised some adopted children, if he managed to shake off his reputation as a loner, he could do more than just pass as a born male. He would feel like one too. Like so many other people in the 1950s, Dylan had enormous hopes for the institution of marriage. It would be the badge of his citizenship, a passport into the land of the ordinary. But would she have him? Would she agree to recognize the penis Gillies had made, that organ that had once inspired her hoots of laughter, as a penis indeed? And that's all I'll read for now, but I have one more picture. And this is actually from the end of Michael Dillon's life, and that's him on the steps, and that's his guru, Sangharajita. And he ended up trying to take vows and become a Tibetan Buddhist monk in India in the late 1950s and early 1960s, and was in fact one of the first Westerners ever to take vows as a Tibetan Buddhist. So in order to find out how that happened, you'll have to buy the book, which is for sale next to the other magazines.
Pagan Kennedy, everybody. So, take a look at the stamp on your hand. If it's a little smiley star face, then you get to come to the super mega secret after orgy that we're having up the street, that we always have every month. The rest of you, stay still, just stay calm. There are gonna be shuttle right here in front of the stage. It's gonna be our mosh pit. And I'm gonna slam into you so hard, you're going to impregnate me, and I'm gonna give birth to babies that are half you, half pavement. And they're gonna smash into your heads, and you're gonna have brain damage from your own babies. How do you feel about that, huh? Do you like that? Yeah, you think that's funny? Well, you're gonna be laughing out of the other side of your ass in a minute until you fucking Chad Sweeney is gonna hold you down, and Howard Junker has a tire iron, and we're gonna fuck you up. Fucking God, makes me so mad. So welcome to fucking angry fighting writer bastards. We got a really good show for you tonight, assholes. First up we have Renee Rivera, who is, she's an erotica writer, and she's fucking angry, okay? And she's gonna fuck you up, and she's part of the Dirty Ink Collective, and she has a story in, I think, Best Lesbian Erotica 2006, which is really awesome. It's called Jubilee, and I saw her perform at Bedtime Stories for Little Sluts last year in North Beach, and she was awesome. And she had like a giant hot mallet. She would swing it at things, and anything she hit with it had like a sexy queer genderplex. Like, bam, this chair is like a fucking high femme diva. Bam, this wall is like a genderqueery dongle splat. Bam, this track lighting now shines inward and like has its own hanky code. Yeah, fucking hanky code track lighting. rollerblading, dude. And she was like, and then she hit the door, and the door turned into this like swirly gender sphere, and we all went inside it, and we were inside it for like 9 months, and like directions were tastes, and I just kept going lemon and further lemon, and all the other bad things that had ever happened to me were just kind of salt. They were salt over salt, and some of them were sour. But anyway, and then I had sex with myself, but only one of me came, and then we finally got out. We'd only been there for 2 seconds, but we all had eyes on our toes, which is why I wear these shoes now. And she's got her mallet again tonight, so fucking watch out, because it's invisible until she starts swinging it, but you guys in the front row, just fucking watch out, that's all I'm telling you. Fucking Renee Rivera!
All right. That's one way to make sure you're going to be more nervous than me. All right, I'm going to read a story from Best Lesbian Erotica 2005. A story called Snowball's Chance in Hell. I know I said that I wanted to go to hell for just a little while. I didn't know that it would be one long pajama party, and that I'd be lying around in pink fuzzy mules watching Grease, Grease 2, and all the Gidget films over and over, while the devil girls eat Hostess snowballs and give each other manicures and pedicures. I thought it would be big burly butch devils with thick veined hands and cocks the size of baseball bats splitting me open in a night that would never end. I thought I'd be Vanessa Del Rio in The Devil and Miss Jones, and instead I'm getting just sick and tired of listening to those devil girls' dull chatter. And good God, I hate Hostess snowballs. I asked the devil girls what they do for fun around here. Don't you ever get a shipment of cute little butch boys in to pinch and bite and fuck silly and generally terrorize until they break down and sob? You know what crybabies butches are. I managed a grin of conspiratorial encouragement, but the devil girls just look back blankly. The first one asks, without turning her gaze from the big screen TV, "Isn't Grease 2 just your favorite movie?" The next devil girl leans in, sympathetically offering the tiny red vial of polish and one of those electric blue foam toe spacers. "Why don't you try the ruby rum punch on your toes this time?" And then the only other one who was even paying attention says, "Here, have another snowball." If I have another snowball, I'm gonna vomit. When I thought of myself here, the devil butches encircled me on cloven hooves, no two alike. The one who hoists me hard against her chest, feet off the ground. At the edge of the dark pit is a great strapping brute of a butch devil wearing nothing over her ruddy skin and muscular limbs but the black cock, thicker than my forearm and just as long, traced with thick raised veins and lashed around her hips and through her legs with one long length of rough cast chain. Above that, pressing against my back, she wears a leather breastplate, buckled around her ribs and over her broad shoulders with 2 stud-traced, star-shaped cutouts, one over each enormous brown nipple, leaving the erect flesh free to press against my back like 2 strong thumbs. Her horns are sawn short to match her short, dark crew cut. The small one, who skitters up to start wrapping my naked body in cool, soothing chain, is as wiry as the first one lifting me is meaty. And her horns corkscrew to points through slicked back, greasy hair curling behind filthy, protruding ears. As the little butch bends, coiling a loop around each of my thighs and pulling roughly outward, I can see a small pig-like tail poking out of her bare, bony buttocks. The crowd of butch devils watching from the other side of the pit are a jumble of snorts, hoots, stink, broad bellies hanging over leather and cock-strapped loins, heads and crotches shaved to coarse stubble, chins with goatee twists of hair, and everywhere wet grins, grasping hands, and bobbing cocks as they jostle and poke each other in anticipation. I'm jolted from my reverie of remembered fantasies by the devil girls. I know, let's crank call our exes. The head devil girl says, shaking her short red curls. The credits are rolling on Grease 2 and absolutely everyone's toes glitter with ruby rum punch. The devil girl grabs the big red princess phone from the floor where it sits almost engulfed by the white shag carpet. She thrusts the phone into the hands of another devil girl lying on the carpet belly down, kicking her drying toes in the air, and snatches the copy of Us magazine out of her hands, provoking a squawk from the busty blonde devil girl. Boy, I've been here too long. Even the devil girls are starting to look good. For a moment, I considered just diving face first into the abundant cleavage of the busty blonde devil girl, holding the phone, the other one having just finished dialing the number. Hey, baby, the blonde starts in a breathy, husky voice. Oh, baby, I just had to call. I can't stop thinking about the other night and how you... She trailed off, and after a pause, what are you doing? Another pause. I'm just waiting for you. Anything you want. Yeah, baby. Of course I remember. All the devil girls are covering their mouths with their hands and burying their faces in each other's shoulders or laps to keep from laughing out loud. The one on the phone is gesturing to show she's got the poor dumb butch on the hook. Oh, don't you worry your sweet little head about that, baby. Your girlfriend doesn't need to know about that. The devil girls are turning red and rolling around on the carpet now with the effort of keeping silent. Oh, baby, I need you. I'm just waiting for you. You remember where to find me. I'll be there waiting for you, baby. Don't keep me waiting. The blonde devil girl hangs up, and all the others burst out, squealing and laughing and tumbling over each other on the rug. Oh my God, that dumb butch. The blonde gasps out between chortles. She thought I was her trick from last Saturday night. Boy, is she gonna get a surprise when she gets to that girl's house. All the devil girls cackle all over again, and then they all start demanding the phone to get in on the fun. Back in my fantasy, the devil butches have got me all locked into my chain harness, and I'm hooked, like a hay bale going into a hayloft, onto another chain hanging from the dark, cavernous ceiling. The big butch holds me out over the pit so I can feel the blast of hot air rising up out of it, and I can see the glow of molten lava far below. That's where you're going when we get tired of you, so have fun up here while it lasts. I spin there on the hook, feeling the chain dig deeper into my inner thighs and tighten across my hip bones. The butch devil's incongruously cool blue eyes look right through me, and then past me to the gaggle of panting devil boys on the other side of the pit. Ain't this a tasty one? The big butch's hands are all over me, spinning me back to face across the pit, but holding me from swinging over. Her huge hands are cracked and lined with dirt and end in long yellow split nails. Raised veins crawl like worms up the back of her hands and across the curve of her muscular forearm. Calloused and dark palms drag hard against my bare chest, one hand grabbing the chains crossed there while the other reaches down to pinch a handful of skin in the softest part of my inner thigh, pulling that leg open. Yeah, that's all for you, boys. The big butch devil calls across the pit to the gibbering mob on the other side. Have fun, boys. And then I'm swinging over the pit to the mob, hot air searing my crotch as I soar across. The blast of sweat, onions, tar, and ammonia overwhelm my senses before I even make contact. But then I'm up inside the cloud of odor, clutching hands and cocks poking in from every angle, jammed up against my buttocks, my belly, looking for purchase. The devil boys grab and pinch at each other as much as at me as they fight for the prime spot between my legs. The devil girls have tired of their games on the phone. After an hour of fun, things have quickly deteriorated into scratching and hair pulling, and more than one devil girl is sporting long marks on a cheek or breast or buttock from another devil girl's long ruby rum punch nails. But now things have calmed down, and the red-headed devil girl has popped another Gidget film into the VCR and squealed, "Oh, this is my absolute favorite," and flopped belly down in front of the TV on the shag rug, her short marabou-trimmed robe flipping up to show bright red panties. As soon as the titles roll, the other devil girls quiet right down. One drops the phone back on a kidney-shaped end table, and then they are all riveted in front of the TV again. My thoughts stray back to the devil boys in the pit, re-entering my fantasy mid-swing. Rough hands are wrapped around my hips from behind as one of the bigger butch devils who has fought all comers to take her place is thrusting her huge cock in my cunt, and it feels like it will just split me open. From the front, another pair of hands wraps around my ears to entwine at the back of my skull. And I'm pulled down into the mass of flesh and stink to find myself facing another huge shaft. Yes, with several more pressing against my cheeks. Facing the choice between 1 and 3, I dive on the nearest cock, taking as much of it into my mouth and throat as I can, while the hands behind my head pull me down even harder. Hands and thighs and arms and cocks are pinching and rubbing and pulling at me over every inch of my exposed flesh. I've no idea how much time has passed when suddenly the bodies part, pulling out and away from my battered and abraded body, and I swing free over the pit again, with the melting heat blasting up onto my raw skin. The butch devils are grinning and pinching each other, and a couple are fumbling with the stiff leather straps around their hips, and moving their cocks aside to reveal thick mats of hair or shaven mounds with huge swollen clits. I have just a moment to wonder what the hell they're up to when the first one lets go with a glittering golden stream, arcing to hit my right thigh as I slowly spin over the pit. Suspended as I am in the rising tower of heat, the liquid feels cool even as it stings my raw, reddened skin. One devil boy after another starts to piss onto my body or down into the pit, and I can hear the hiss and sizzle on the rocks below. The cloud of ammonia vapor envelops me, and I see it rise off my dripping skin. I hear a metallic rattle, and then I'm falling through the piss steam cloud and down into fiery oblivion. I sigh, though not loud enough to attract the devil girl's attention, and pick at a half-eaten snowball that's in danger of being ground into the carpet. Who would have thought it would be so boring in hell? One devil girl gets up and picks her way through the prone bodies on the carpet on the way to the bathroom. The movie has grown quiet, and I hear a couple of snores, and then a cheery tinkle through the open bathroom door. Hell is not all I had hoped it would be.
Hi, I'm David Byrne, and I'm here to tell you about my new style of music called Mochacello. Mochacello is a frosty blend of Motown, Calypso, Chill House, and O. It's all part of my new mission to take indigenous, racial, ethnic, cultural musics and just swirl them up with world beats for your entertainment and your delicious pleasure. It's also my new drink, which you can get for a limited time only at Starbucks if you buy a Mochacello Classic mix CD. Also, you can also opt for the Mochacello Enema, which is great because it supercharges all of the bacteria inside your colon, and they become 10,000 times smarter. They become like MIT PhD physicist bacteria. And it has a trickle-up effect because if your colon bacteria are smarter, eventually you become smarter, and then it just feeds back on itself until finally you explode. Mochacello, check it out today. Meanwhile, and we're going to do one song from my Mochacello CD, and accompanying me on the electric triangle is going to be Nicole Gluckstern. Nicole, can you come on up, please? She's awesome. She's actually a travel writer. Nicole rocks. She's written for other, and sorry, I'm still introducing you. Go get it. And she's been pretty much everywhere in the world, like 3 or 4 times, and she's a badass. She's a bouncer at the Marsh. They have all those non-consensual like chiropractors, and she just like beats them, you know. She's traveled by Zeppelin, by hyper-pressurized sausage, and by Kate Winslet. There was that whole thing where Kate Winslet was carrying people across Europe because she heard that was a way to lose weight, and she was like being chased by bandits and had to fend them off with like a flamethrower without damaging Kate Winslet's like blue hair. It was when she was doing Eternal Sunshine, and she also invented the travel sonnet, which is like each stanza is a different time zone, and then they all come together at the end. And and people pay. They pay you, right, to be in their backyard and rough it, and then they can feel foreign. And so she's actually, you hire her today. She's amazing. She'll make you feel really exotic. So please welcome the amazing Nicole Gluckstern.
Wow, I don't know if I can even live up to that billing, but I'll try. I'm super nervous, actually. I'm really nervous to be here. And I read this book. So I read this book about public speaking because I thought I should get to know a little bit more about it before I actually did it. And they recommended that old chestnut, how you're supposed to imagine your audience is naked. So I am, in fact, imagining each and every one of you as being naked. And I have to tell you, it doesn't actually make me feel less nervous. But it does make me feel really overdressed. So if I start twitching, that's why. This is one of my favorite travel stories, even though it's not set in a very exotic location. In fact, it starts in Colorado, which is not exotic. But it's sort of like an origin story, like how did you become a traveler sort of thing. And it happened a long time ago, and I call it a motorcycle diary. Nobody looks ugly on a motorcycle. This popular wisdom was first passed on to me by my friend Frank, who is living proof of its veracity. If a guy as gangling and underwashed as he could still look bitching rolling up on his 1100 Yamaha, there was hope for us all. It was true, hygiene aside, you couldn't tear your eyes off a badass biker barreling through the city en route to beyond. At any rate, you couldn't if you were 22 and nursing beat poet fantasies of reinventing adventure and literature both. Itching with unrequited wanderlust, I knew the key to everything lay on the open road, but it was getting there that was proving tricky. Serendipitously, Frank acquired his wheels at the same time I was waging my annual campaign to get my roommate Soren to take me to New Orleans for Halloween on the back of his motorcycle, which was a trip he'd been promising for years. Halloween in Colorado is a miserable affair with guaranteed snow and treacherous ice sheets. I spoke of the balmy temperatures we were bound to find in New Orleans. I ruminated on Anne Rice and her famous vampire parties. I voiced visions of Bourbon Street, dancing queens and libertines, and somehow it worked. We were going to New Orleans at last, and Frank, who drifted some years before around the French Quarter, would be our guide. Certain events which should be taken as signs are ignored as such by pragmatists. Like when Soren came home the day before our journey to tell me that he'd just burned out the electrics on his motorcycle test driving it on the highway. When you say burned out, I asked, what exactly does that mean? It means they caught on fire and melted together. Well, shit, I said, what are we gonna do? I'll think of something. Soren, a philosophy major, was big on thinking. After tinkering fruitlessly on his bike for muskchip the next morning, Soren disappeared that afternoon. Just as I was fretting for lost time and lost opportunities, he wheeled into our parking lot with a loaner from a friend. It was half the size of his now defunct bike. It was a 550 Kawasaki, to be exact. I examined it skeptically. Are we both even going to fit? I noticed with trepidation the lack of a backrest, footrests, baggage room, horsepower, class. This bike was no roadster, and I somehow doubted it would project the desired road warrior effect on our overall image. When Frank saw a replacement, he laughed and offered to let Soren ride his bike, occasionally, to give us a break. Guess you can't take me on the back of your bike now, I asked. He looked doubtful. I've never done it before, maybe when I get more comfortable with the road. Soren tied our packs to the back of the itty-bitty bike with bungees and loops of twine where they drooped dangerously close to the ground. Frank had a pair of battered saddlebags into which he shoved all his worldly possessions, a few clothes, a few coverless paperbacks. It was 5 o'clock and the sky was already showing signs of approaching twilight. Soren swung himself onto his saddle and I awkwardly boarded mine. He tried to start the engine and kicked me in the shins. Let me start it first and then you can get on. I nodded and removed myself from harm's way as he kicked the starter, and the mini-cycle roared, or rather buzzed, to life. I hopped back on and noticed there was nowhere to put my hands, so I put them gingerly on Soren's hips and we rolled on down the road. I will skip over the mundane horrors of riding a motorcycle overnight across three state lines during the coldest October in 100 years. Let's just say that 2 pairs of pants, 1 pair of tights, 2 pairs of socks, 3 pairs of gloves, 2 sweaters, a flannel shirt, a scarf, a hat, and a leather jacket do not appreciably stand up to an 80-mile-per-hour wind chill factor in 40-degree weather. But after a recuperative night at Frank's foster mother's in Oklahoma, we were ready to tackle Texas. In an epiphany of generosity, Frank let Soren and me ride his bike for the afternoon. How nice it was to settle on the back of a road-sized bike with a road-sized shock suspension system. The only drawback to my new perch was still no footrests, obstructed as they were by Frank's bulging saddlebags. I wriggled my toes cautiously underneath them, fighting for purchase. All seemed well until the acrid smell of smoldering synthetics hit my nose. It barely registered at first. Highways all over the world are known for their superfluence of noxious odors. But this odor refused to dissipate, and after a short while I became aware that my foot, which had fallen gently asleep some miles before, was feeling noticeably revived and uncomfortably warm. I leaned as far to the side as I dared and observed that Frank's worldly possessions were merely belching smoke, a consequence of being shoved against the powerful engine. I pounded Soren on the back. His attention not immediately forthcoming, I pounded harder still until he turned his head slightly in my direction and lifted his helmet visor. "What?" he screamed into the wind. "Pull over," I screamed back. "What?" He couldn't hear me. I pushed my own visor back and shouted again, "Pull over!" He shook his head. "I can't hear you." I began gesticulating wildly at the side of the road. "Over there!" I was yelling. "Pull over there!" I pointed to the smoking bags, but that seemed to confuse the issue, so I let them go and concentrated on getting him to stop the bike. Finally, he pulled over onto a soft shoulder and turned off the engine. I wrenched my foot out from under the burning saddlebag. My canvas shoe and the cuff of my jeans were smoldering. I beat them with my hands until the sparks went out. Soren's attention was on the bikes. On the bags. He dragged them from the bike, stamping them to the ground. The worst damage was caused by a red and black striped polyester Afghan, which refused to stop burning until it was torn from the saddlebag, molten and dribbling, and rolled around the Texas topsoil. Of Frank himself, there was no sign. Who knew when he would finally realize he was riding alone? And besides, what are we going to tell him, Soren wondered. It was a good question, and when Frank appeared, buzzing blissfully over the horizon an hour later, we told him we could each donate a couple of t-shirts to see him through the winter. Frank was sanguine about his loss, except for the Afghan, which his foster mother had knitted. He gathered the blackened shreds and packed them reverently into a plastic bag. At our next rest stop, he commandeered a pair of scissors and made a scarf out of the remnants, slinging it jauntily around his wiry neck. To make up for lost time, we drove overnight again, all the way to Louisiana. Because it was just a couple of months after Louisiana had reluctantly given in to the federal government's demand that it change the legal drinking age to 21, the road, which hadn't received federal funds in 3 years, was one enormous pothole from the border onward. We jounced along the rutted ruins of the highway, our teeth rattling behind clenched jaws, until we approached the final toll bridge, the Big Easy, New Orleans at last. I cheered as we crossed the bridge and plunged into the mid-morning swirl of urban traffic. Frank unexpectedly took a right turn before we could follow, and we pulled over into the nearest parking lot to await his return. I hope it doesn't take him an hour to find us this time, I fretted. Soren looked around the lot and at the traffic streaming past and turned to me with a gently puzzled expression on his face. "Where are we?" he asked. New Orleans, I reminded him. "Home of the All-American Vampire, remember?" "I don't remember getting here," he said mildly. "I think maybe I've been asleep." "You definitely don't want to tell me that," I said. It was plenty warm now, the air a fragrant, humid stew of swamp rot and urban pollution. Though the street we were on was nondescript enough, the lush atmosphere was pure bayou. We weren't in Texas anymore, that was for sure. We slumped, waiting, nodding off from exhaustion, when Frank zoomed up and urged us to follow. We followed him to a dingy, anonymous motel, where we managed to convince the Chinese desk clerk to check us in early, and stumbled gratefully into a dingy, anonymous room. All three of us piled into the one threadbare bed, me in the middle, thinking if only I were Jack Kerouac or some goddamn person, I'd be getting it on with not one but two of my favorite people in the world. I contented myself by holding their clammy hands in mine, tiny sugar ants tickling our elbows as we drifted into hard-earned sleep. Thanks very much.
Nicole Gluckstern, everybody. So do you dare to sit in my mosh pit? Because there's space up here if you want to sit in front of the stage. There's also space to sit over there and over there. You know, I fucking hate the straights and I fucking hate the queers. I especially hate the straight acting queers and the queer acting straights, but I hate the other kinds too. Fuckers. You know what else I hate? You know what? Actually, I've been meaning to bring this. I'm losing my voice already because I've been yelling. You know what else I hate? I fucking hate. You know, I've been meaning to bring this up with you. It's, you know, it's really bugging me. It's your isism. You know, isism is it's really hurtful. It's the unreasoning prejudice on the part of those of you who exist against those of us who don't. And you know, it's not our fault. You know, one day happened. You know, in the everyday course of business, I just stopped thinking. And then I wasn't. And then, you know, and now you guys like just totally diss us for like our unreality. And you know, it's the bane of my non-existence. And I'm just asking you, those of you, you know, who still exist, to spare a thought for those of us who don't have a thought to spare, okay? Thank you. So, thank you. So next up, I'm really losing my voice. Okay, this is bad. Next up, we have an amazing comedian, Shanique Scott, who she's a comedian. She's performed at Q Comedy and Smacked Up. She's had several one-woman shows, including the Josephine Baker story. Is that right? What was it called? It was about Josephine Baker. I know. That was a play. I'm so sorry. Okay, cool. It's Prisms. Presence. Sorry, I am losing my voice and brain dead. And I actually saw her at the Queer Cultural Center. I don't know if the Queer Community Center, back when it was still like 500 feet underground and you had to jump into those little chutes and like slide down, you know, at like 100 miles an hour. And she actually built a slingshot to help people get back up again. She was great. And like, she was I don't know if any of you actually saw the Happy Endangered Plant Squad cartoons that were on a few years ago. She was the voice of Roxy the Redwood. Where it was like, you know, basically it was like the last remaining members of certain plant species sharing an apartment. Like there was a redwood tree and the last coral reef, and like, you know, there was some old growth rainforests. Like they would go to McDonald's and they would fight over the remote and they would drive around in an SUV, and the whole point was that like they're happy because they're living the American consumer lifestyle. And basically like she started working all these little subversive messages in there where Roxy the Redwood was like, you know, kind of mourning her redwood sisters and brothers, and like, and the whole sort of like little subversive little mulch references and like composting, you know, and you know, they were funny, but they were kind of, you know, they started to, the suits got nervous, and so her character was actually killed off and pulped and turned into fast food bags. So all the other, like the coral reef was like, hey, we like fast food bags. But now she's got a whole new career. Like she's actually doing Roxy Redwood like webtoons and traveling around and like she's become kind of a culture hero because she's like the last bastion of like endangered plant resistance. And you know, I think we should give her some major props for that, as well as for her amazing comedy. So please welcome the amazing Shanique Scott.
Hi, thank you, Charlie. That doesn't sound like somebody losing their voice. Okay, so wow, he's tall. So the show that I do is entitled Prisons. It's fine. Prisons will be at the La Peña Cultural Center June 29th and 30th, and a piece I'm doing from it is a comedy piece, and it's about my encountering a bully in elementary school.
You ate salt and vinegar potato chips and smacked your mouth when you talked about people. The same thing that happened to happened to my other friend. Her mother put a bad perm in her hair, and all her hair fell out. And you can dance. Lottie-dottie, we like to party. You don't cause trouble. You don't bother nobody. Just do that. All right. It's roll, pop, roll, pop, roll, pop. All right, you try it. Roll, pop, roll, pop. No, you gotta pop it like roll, pop, Forget it, you too stiff. I remember my cousin used to try to teach me how to dance, but I was so stiff, my favorite dance was this. You had to have memorized at least 50 Yo Mama jokes and snaps, just in case you got into a battle. Oh, dear. Tamika, I called Shanique house, right? And a roach answered the phone talking about, hold on, let me see if she in the kitchen. Corny jokes, too. That's another thing. The corny kids would make it in with the popular kids. Just tell a joke about somebody else. Oh, dear. Sharon said you took a red marker and wrote Reebok on the back of your no-name brand stickers. And you can snap all you want, but don't you dare ever talk about nobody's mama. Your mama was fighting words for show. And if you're gonna get all crazy, you better know how to fight. And the one thing I knew how to do was fight. And 99.9% of the time that worked for me. Until the big, ugly, black, hair forced into a ponytail knowing her hair ain't long enough, jacked up her split ends, ashy, knock-knee, pencil leg, 14 in the 5th grade girl, obviously with some mental issues, named Antoinette, was transferred to my elementary school. Well, Don Bell, you smell? What is you staring at? Dang! Y'all, I tried to look away. Well, something down my throat. Something down my throat. You want my food pretty dang! Yo, I tried to walk away, but even if I made a mistake and looked in my direction, swear, Monique, I'ma lose my mind. I'ma kill her if this girl keeps staring. What is you staring at? Dang! Y'all, I was afraid of her. Next thing you know, I'm on the monkey bars minding my own business. And here comes her little elf friend, Monique. Antoinette said you were bum. You look like you stepped right out of the civilian rights movement with your bell bottoms on. And your fake sheepskin shirt. And and you stink. And she gonna fight you at 3 o'clock, so be ready. And I'm crying like, just my luck. Out of all the girls that want to fight me, why I got to be that big, ugly Antoinette? I tell you, I cried all day. I was the last one to leave the school building. Don't you know when I got outside? It seemed like the whole school was waiting out there for me. They made a big circle. They paved the way. Y'all, they was chanting, Antoinette, boom-ba-yay. Antoinette, boom-ba-yay. Antoinette, boom-ba-yay. Y'all, they had the red carpet and everything. I walked through all timid and scared. And there she was. Big black Antoinette. Antoinette was taking off her earrings. She's slapping on that Vaseline. For those of y'all who don't know, Vaseline is put on so when you fight somebody and you try to grab on and hold on to something, your hand slip and you feel all helpless. And I'm standing there thinking of what to do. And before you know it, Antoinette is heading toward me like a whirlwind. Get off me. Get off my shirt. For real, get off my ponytail. For real, get off me. I'm not gonna hit you. I'm not gonna hit you. What you doing? There's no easy way to put it. I had Vaseline from head to toe. One of my little friends after the fact was like, damn, Shanique, you look messed up. I tried to hand you my notebook so you could hit her with it, but I guess you was busy. Yeah, busy getting my behind whipped. I tell you, it was a terrible experience. I'm almost in tears right now just talking about it. Thank you.
Shanique Scott, everybody. So we have a new issue of Other Magazine. We lit shit on fire. We went to Golden Gate Park and lit shit on fire. And we questioned the fucking genderocracy, and the genderocracy didn't have any answers, even fucking lame ones. It was all just like, we were like, genderocracy, where the fuck were you last Thursday night? And it was like, it was just completely pathetic. And basically it's all part of my secret campaign to overthrow the genderocracy so I can be the new genderocracy. I'll do a really good job. I will assign each and every one of you a really great gender, I promise. Trust me. It's great, and this can be yours for only $5, and it has Jewish people excommunicating each other, which is actually way, way, way more fun than it sounds. I do that every weekend, and fucking radical queer gender people battling it out to see who's more radical, and burlesque dancers and strippers like having sequin fights. It's awesome, and tassels, and it's really, really cool. We're selling them for like $5, and we'll be back in like 10 minutes. Thanks a lot.